Thank you very much, Mary. I was very, very happy and honoured to be an education officer with the NCCA for the 14 years that I was working with them. My very first position was to be senior biology education officer, and my duties were quite extensive, as you can see there. I was to design a new Leaving Cert, not a revised Leaving Cert, a new Leaving Cert syllabus for senior biology, ordinary higher level, course introduction, aims, objectives, course content, course resources, teacher guidelines, criteria for evaluation of students' performance, assessment structures, sample papers, coordinate work of the biology course committee, senior cycle, prepare an implementation plan for the Department of Education and Science, advise council on junior cert science review and all senior level courses related to biology and biology issues, and to keep a watching brief on the development of ag science and home economics. Okay, so quite extensive there. The course committee, that was in December, and the first meeting of the course committee was held in April 1993. Seems years and years ago. And you can see the composition of the course committee there. It was quite a large number of teachers present, including myself, because I was only on secondment for 2-3 days a week from school. Of course, was back to reality on the other days. So it was quite well represented by teachers, I must say, and those that weren't directly representing teacher groups, they had plenty of teaching experience themselves as well. You'll notice there as well, there were 2 inspectors, biology and ag science. The brief of the course committee was slightly different to my own brief. They were to prepare a new biology syllabus and to provide recommendations to council of the NCCA for approval of the biology syllabus. Now, the instructions I gave was given at the very beginning. Some were absolute that I had to hold dear to. Others were considerations, and there was leeway for myself to add in extra then as well. So in terms of the absolute and direct instructions, these came from the DES, Department of Education and Science, as it was called then, General Aims and Principles for Leaving Cert Programs. And this was common to all the different syllabi, irrespective of science or not. And then we just simply changed the aspects in terms of the science. So it was to contribute science, general education, encourage students in attitude, scientific inquiry, curiosity, self-discovery, develop an understanding of biological facts and principles, and appreciation of nature, application biology, and so forth. So these were kind of common aims that were present in physics, chemistry, biology, okay? Then the objectives were very specific. Now this was very, very important to us. And this came from the Senior Science Steering Committee, which stated that the Leaving Certificate Science syllabus should be offered at 2 levels and be designed to incorporate the following components: knowledge, understanding and skills, 70%, application to basic technology, 22.5%, science and political, social and economic spheres, 7.5%. That was really a huge guiding directive to us. Constantly, we were caught, we were made to account to these particular 3 points. And then the duration of the syllabus was to be designed for 2 years, or 330 class periods, or 220 hours. Now, you're familiar with a lot of this already, I'm sure many of you. The considerations that we were also to take into account, but not as absolute as the directions of aims, objectives, and durations, were directed by the Senior Science Steering Committee again, right? We were also relating to the Green and White Papers of Education Act, with special emphasis on equality of opportunity. And then the Culleton report was very influential on physics, chemistry, and biology, current biology syllabi. And Culleton really was talking about that up to then, teaching and education and the syllabi were very much directed towards academic performance as such and entry into 3rd level. Now, he said, there's time to start looking at a different emphasis and to include skill development. That was a major change at the time of the syllabi being initiated. The third one then was areas that was of common concern for myself. Biology, I felt, was the study of life. The cell was the unit of life. I was given an open hand, absolutely. There was no such thing as restrictions other than what I've just mentioned, the three initial ones there. Other than that, it was genuinely an open book, all right? But it was to be a new syllabus. And so in starting then, biology, the study of life. Biology is a science because I felt at the time, and us biology teachers, and I'm also a chemistry teacher, but I saw a huge difference between chemistry teaching and biology. Biology really wasn't science, you know. I mean, it was really physics and chemistry. They are the sciences. And we still relate to that when we look at statistics of our students taking the leaving cert, etc. That, you know, so it was something I wanted to bring into the biology, a statement clearly that biology was a science and that we did apply scientific method and so forth and so forth. So that was behind my mind there in that case. Of course, to modernize the whole biology syllabus. It had been in existence, nearly as old as this current one now. It was in existence, I think, 25 years at this stage, okay? And then, again, I was concerned about the pitching of ordinary level and higher level. I'll come back to that again. The level of predictability in assessment and completeness of assessment. At the time, you could be asked anything. There was no structure at all to the Leaving Cert biology examination paper. I was teaching maths as well as chemistry. And I felt, you know, in maths, there was a certain predictability there. We knew how many coordinate geometry questions, how many trigonometry questions, and what was going to be on paper one, paper two. And it didn't really do anything negative to the teaching of maths at the time. So I felt there could be something similar brought into Leaving Cert biology, a certain predictability. There were times when you wouldn't be asked any question on genetics. They might another time leave out ecology altogether. So it was a huge, open, broad. So I felt there was need for change in that area. And then I was very concerned about the three domains of learning in terms of the fact that the psychomotor and the affective domain weren't really being covered that well, really. Prior to that, it was very much on cognitive basis. And then, of course, because I was very much involved at that stage with the ASTI and the ISTA, I felt really that teachers needed, whatever would come out, definite support and resources at that stage, okay? Now, in relation to the pitching the ordinary level and higher level course, it was very difficult initially. How do you go about that? So I inquired, and Professor Des Swan from UCD advised me, and we sat and looked at the situation about the matriculation that Professor Hyland spoke about earlier on, that was the pitch really that he took as ordinary level, that was just slightly above ordinary level. And he'd already previous study done on this. So he was saying that a person with an IQ of 103 would be a person for ordinary level. So over IQ 103 would be higher level, up to IQ 103 was pitched for ordinary level. Now, what that would have meant would be that a person looking at a graph, we'd say that, you know, to the lower orders there in the domain of learning would have been for IQ 103, okay? They would have had synthesis and analysis, but really they would just simply be able to draw the graph, the axis, but they wouldn't be able to identify the trend of the graph and so forth. Now, that was very valuable as well, because from the very beginning then, we were not looking at the subject biology. We were looking at it from an education point of view, and that's where I wanted to take it at that early stage. Of course, publications on new knowledge of understanding the application and of biology was taken into account. And the NCCA then at that stage, we certainly looked at, and I was given the syllabi of the UK, the French, Queensland, New South Wales, USA, and Alberta, Canada. They were the primary syllabi that we were looking at in terms of reviewing and writing these syllabi at the time. Personally speaking, I was most impressed with the Queensland and New South Wales. The structure of the syllabus eventually came down to being something equivalent to the UK in terms of presentation. But the background in terms of teacher resources, teacher guidelines, depth of knowledge, etc., that really, from my point of view, came from my readings and the work in the Queensland and New South Wales. Then, of course, there were the contributions of the committee members, which were bringing ideas from their representative bodies. And then we had over 22 submissions, which included, for example, the Department of Justice, right? The Department of Justice felt that if you had a jury and you were introducing DNA and profiling, etc., that would be wonderful if, since 60% of our students nowadays, but at that stage, 40% of students were taking biology, that at least you had a good cohort and possibility of having somebody in the jury that would understand about DNA profiling, etc. So it was extraordinary, the groups that would come in and offer ideas and offer their interest in the development of a syllabus. Right, so there were the outcomes. Then what happened was that we didn't have computers. So what you see here was my initial presentation to the course committee and to the NCCA as such. Now, a lot of it is common to what eventually ended up on the syllabus, but the outer rim you can see here, I had ecology, genetics, and biotechnology. I was told at the time quite clearly I was not to talk about biotechnology. I should talk about applied biology. So there are certain limitations there. As well as that, my idea was that that outer rim would have been that higher level students would have taken two of those options there at an in-depth level. In other words, they take ecology, genetics, ecology, biotechnology, or so forth. Okay. Again, the department's thinking at the time and the State Examination Commission was that avoid having choice really within the paper, because if you add in choice within a paper and a number of unit choices, it means that you're not designing one paper. You know, the standard has to be maintained for 4, 5, and whatever the permutation combinations of the outcome of that would be. Okay, so we're to avoid having choice within paper for that reason. Okay, now the course committee meetings, just in compare, I'm not too sure, maybe the others that will address you now straight after me, but our course committees, as they were called then, I was seconded for 3 days a week from 1993 to 96. Meetings were held of the course committee once every 6 weeks for 3 years initially. Then I was seconded for another 3 days for the next one. Meetings again were reduced to 2, and eventually as we came close and close to completing our works, obviously the number of meetings were greatly reduced. Okay. Now, the agenda of those meetings, and just to share with you what used to happen at the meetings, clearly, you had minutes and matters arising, review of work from previous meetings. Now, this is a very important point. It was to discuss and debate in-depth proposals and presentations by myself as Education Officer of the syllabus content, word by word. And it was so detailed, the discussions, that these word-by-word discussions ended up actually as the teacher guidelines. So I can say that the teacher guidelines in biology currently, I don't know about physics and chemistry, but for me, the teacher guidelines were written before the syllabus. It gave us such in-depth, right? And I'll show you examples of that later on. So I just want to point that out to you there, where it was coming from. Reports from the Education Officer seen, there are other things that happened obviously as well that we had to take into account. Now, just looking very clearly at the first proposal there, we looked at biology as 3-stream. Biology is the study of life. The introduction of biology is a study defined, then the cell, okay, and then the organism. And what ended out then, and then as well as that, we decided that, you know, that for contemporary issues, teachers should have a certain leeway themselves. So I don't know how it worked out for you, but our intention was that not to design a course for 330 class periods, but in fact to design for 270, which would have allowed teachers in the over a period of time then extra time to do extra things, to consider contemporary issues if it arose from day to day, and also the idea that if I was a teacher and my qualification and my specification was in microbiology, I'd have time to expand and show my love and wonder and awe that I would have personally for microbiology. That was the intention there of reducing the number of class periods to give it back to the teachers to be themselves and so forth. Okay. So as I said, we had 3 initial circles in the middle, right? And they eventually became the syllabus structure, Unit 1, the study of life, Unit 2, the cell, Unit 3, the organism. So that was retained, the idea of the 3 main units. Then, as you can see here, the subunits then into the subunits are, as I said, study of life defined and so forth. And again, that came into being as well. Okay. So, and also, as I said, I was conscious as a teacher going back to the school after meetings, like every other person, the course committee, that the reality of, well, how does this fit into how much time, etc., would I have to teach this section of the course, and work it out that way. Okay. Now, I said that the teacher guidelines were written before the syllabus, and this was what we studied and what we examined as a course committee, word for word. Now, what you see in the preamble here is something akin, I suppose, to the learning outcomes, but not in the words of learning outcomes, because they didn't exist in those days anyway. So really we just had to ask, well, what did we want students to know or pupils to know in terms of nutrition? Right? So we came up with saying, well, first of all living organisms need nutrients. Nutrients provide materials and energy and so forth and so forth. Okay? Was there any particular practical or laboratory that activity that we wanted here? And we identified then 1. So the ones there we have there, conduct nutrition, and then of course we had the timeline as well. Now that was subdivided into depth of treatment that we were saying. So, for example, function of food, depth of treatment, explain in simple terms why food is required by all living organisms. Place specific emphasis on your teaching on provision of materials and energy for the process of metabolism continuity. So cells are going to be living organisms, and based basically on chemical reactions. The chemical reactions need the materials for reaction and also energy and so forth. As you see here, the depth of treatment, state chemicals present in food, and we listed out the chemicals, and we listed out the trace elements and so forth. Highly, highly specific. Okay? And again, in case people were misunderstood, what we meant by carbohydrates contained elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, the smallest unit of carbohydrate. There we were nearly teaching teachers, as you can see, right? It was nearly a textbook standard. And that's what it ended up as, a textbook. So then, of course, that we couldn't have, because you couldn't have a textbook with publishers. I hope none of you here. But that they would be complaining because, that we had produced a textbook and what about all the different companies, etc. So we had to pull back on extra bits and pieces. We just would say, define something rather than giving the detail of the definition. So that's the way it worked through. And then, as you can see, in line with the UK structures, and also you can see similarity in physics and chemistry, subunits, depth of treatment, contemporary issues and technology, the teacher guidelines became the syllabus. Okay? In other words, we synopsized the bits and pieces of the depth of treatment back into a syllabus structure. Okay? And that's an example, and you're all familiar with that, so we won't delay with that. Okay? And then again, after this was produced, we looked then at the detailed practicals, and we went to detail in that in terms of producing a manual for teachers in terms of each of the practicals. And we also looked at skill attainment, because, as I said, we were approaching it from an educational, and we were talking about also Bloom's taxonomy, and we were talking about what skills, what psychomotor skills would we require students to have. And there were very specifically selected practicals to get as many psychomotor skills into being as such. Equally, on this page here, we were looking at the possibility of a practical examination in the Leaving Cert component, in which case these would have been the headings that the pupils would have been assessed on. How their ability to follow instructions, their correct manipulation of apparatus. So you can see the link there in terms of skill attainment plus then the whole outcome of the possibility of having one day, if not immediately at the time, practical assessment. Okay. Now, teachers are given further background information, right, in the production of the teacher guidelines, etc., with regard to the information that students wouldn't need to have, but the teachers would, in fact, need a little bit extra. Okay? So Unit 2 was the same. It picked up on the circle again, and Unit 3 also picked up on the circle, but we did exclude the outer rim as being a possibility for higher level in that instance. Okay? There was Unit 3, and then so instead, for differentiate between ordinary and higher level, we decided that the range of topics, higher level incorporated all the ordinary level, and higher level an extended range of topics is required, and the depth of treatment then, the ordinary level, of course, provided an overview of biology and application, and then higher level, a deeper, more quantitative treatment of biology would be required. So again, we're kind of looking at the Professor Swan's idea of ordinary level, higher level, what their ability could be, etc., and extended that. And that's the kind of way, as you're aware of, that we presented the higher level then. Okay? So in all then, we had a biology syllabus, we had the teacher guidelines, and then we had the support material. Okay? And you can see that the teacher guide, the syllabus and the teacher guidelines contained the harp. And the harp on top of the syllabus, we were told, was very important. This was a legal document, right? And that would mean that at the time, if this was a legal document, it would have to be translated into Irish. Now, I don't know whether this is down to penny or otherwise, but the harp was in these, so each of those now were required to be translated into Irish, irrespective of what depth of treatment it was. So they were, okay? Whereas the support material for the practicals hasn't any harp in it, okay? And therefore it has a different emphasis in terms of the department's thinking there. But as I said from the outset, I am very proud to have been involved in the NCCA as Education Officer for 14 years. It was a wonderful place to work with and the course committee were absolutely part of what was happening, what the outcome eventually came into being. And we had a wonderful social, I must say, occasions within our committee meetings and so forth. So it was a very, very friendly atmosphere. Everybody was making their contribution. Every contribution, word for word, as I said, was welcome and became part of the syllabus. So at the end of the day, I could honestly say that every one of those course committees who represented the teachers by way of their representation, could own that syllabus. And I think that was one of the successes of the syllabus as such. The fact that we looked at, the details to that level. And as I said, the teacher guidelines were nearly written first. In terms of the assessment, we have terminal examination paper, right, materials within syllabus, examinable, etc. And this was the predictability. We wanted predictability in terms of the structure of the biology, and that's where that came from. Okay, you're familiar with those and again, the mark distribution as even as we could. We had to look at the statistics. If you left out Unit 1, could you get full marks? Could you get 9? So we had to look at all those ins and outs as well, and the statistics of that. Now, the overall assessment then, we felt towards complete assessment, we needed a cognitive domain of assessment, we needed the affective domain of learning to be assessed, and we needed the psychomotor domain of learning. We felt really, if you're just assessing the cognitive, it's an incomplete assessment. And in fact, there was fear that maybe there could be a course brought against the department, etc., and the State Examination Commission in that the incompleteness, that this does not, the Leaving Cert does not reflect my child's assessment if it's just the cognitive. What about the other aspects of his learning? Why did you ignore those in terms of the psychomotor and the affective domain? So that's where that came into being, and you notice there, which may be introduced at the later stage, and the psychomotor, which may be introduced at a later stage, was the terminology within. There was no question, as I was saying, will be or should be, etc., being introduced. It maybe was the more general term. Now, just before I finish, I just want to say about the ordinary, the cognitive, how this was divided up very carefully. Right. So if you just concentrate on the pure science, for example, for ordinary level, we put a weighting target within the higher level towards the upper order of the learning domains where it's emphasized there. Finally, the major changes in knowledge and understanding moved from evolution approach to cellular. So there was this was a new syllabus. It was not a revised syllabus. Okay. We had inclusion of contemporary issues and technology. I sneaked in, as somebody said there earlier on, that somebody sneaked in something before publication. I did change kind of applied biology to technology there. That's the only sneaking in I did, I must say, without the approval of the full committee there. But I knew I had 99.9%. There was only one person that objected to the term biotechnology. Emphasis on skill attainment as well. The interesting thing then, I leave that be now and move along there quickly. Yeah, I think this is a very important document. I don't know if you all have read it or not. In 1012 or 1012 or 2012, the department looked at biology, the inspectorate, right, teaching, learning, post-primary schools. And so looked at it, how did it emerge? What happened to the syllabus? How successful was it? How successful was the in-service and so forth? And it was a very good and positive document. As I said, it is worth looking at it. As you know, this was the statistics given at the time. Talking about the new syllabus was brought in with 43.5%. Now, as was mentioned by Professor Highland, we're up 63%. Now, I hate throwing around figures like that, but it does show the aspects there. And the report also stated that the increase in number of students nationally choosing both the subject and the higher level option, there was a beneficial impact of the in-service for teachers, the benefits derived from the increasing use of information and communication technology preparing the teaching lessons, proficiency in biology teachers in developing students' ability to make informed evaluation about contemporary biological issues, the strongly positive findings related to the implementation of the course of laboratory work and fieldwork studies was also highlighted. So, as I said, maybe because we're at just learning stage, you can see if this syllabus that's being proposed now for biology is a revised syllabus, a lot of the depth of treatment are already written, and if it's just a few topical changes, then it means that there shouldn't be an awful lot of time required for review and for the change back to what was proposed this morning by our previous speakers and so forth. So, I mean, the depth of treatment, I would not see a major issue with it if, as I said, they're already written from the previous, and this is a review of syllabi, not simply a new syllabi as such, and then so forth. Okay? So thank you very much indeed.